Wow, these look like the finest red heifers from around the world.
The Second Temple was a miracle of engineering and elevated Jerusalem to the true worship center for all Jews. Herod began construction work on the temple in the 18th year of his reign, around 19 BC. To avoid interruption in the temple service, Herod had all the materials made ready in advance, preparing 1,000 wagons to carry the stones and employing 10,000 highly skilled workmen. 1,000 priests were divided into those who would be the stonemasons and carpenters and given special training for this sensitive task. Herod the Great doubled the size of the previous Temple Mount and extended it to the south, west, and north. It was a gigantic structure and a wonder that attracted pilgrims from all over the world. Its glory did not last long, however, because in AD 70 the Romans, in retaliation for the Jewish revolt, decided to demolish the temple. The Romans ensured that nothing would be left of the original temple building. Massive stones that Herod put to enlarge the temple complex were now thrown down into the streets below. For centuries, the Temple Mount stayed abandoned until the Muslim conquest of the Holy Land. Today, the plaza is dominated by two monumental structures originally built after the city's capture in 661 AD, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But what if I tell you that the Jewish dream to rebuild the temple is not over? There are things that are happening currently in Israel and around the world that clear out the way for the new Jewish temple. In this episode, we will talk about those fascinating preparations, the consequences of what it would mean if a new temple is built, and what still needs to happen for it to be completed. But before we will do that, please don't forget to subscribe to the Israel My channel, give a like to this video and leave a comment. With that out of the way, let's begin our episode. The destruction of the temple changed the Jewish people forever. The temple was essential to the Jewish worship of God. Sacrifices of animals, grain, oil, wine, and other substances offered on the altar were an integral part of the service in the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert, and in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. A service entrusted to the Kohanim, the priests. The sacrifices are mentioned in numerous places in the scripture, and large sections of the Bible, particularly in Leviticus, are dedicated to discussing their laws. But when the temple was destroyed, the whole group of Jewish people responsible for the service in the temple became useless. The temple could not be rebuilt in a different place because Mount Moriah was chosen by God as the foundation for the temple. So, the Jews could not just build a temple in a different place, it had to be in Jerusalem and on Mount Moriah. After Jewish uprisings against the Romans, most of the Jewish people were exiled from Jerusalem and prohibited to return. When centuries later the Jews started to slowly return to Jerusalem, it was already transformed into a Muslim city with the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Because of those events, the Jewish religion evolved and replaced the sacrificial system with many prayers and deeds that substitute the sacrifices. Jewish worship stopped being centrally organized around the temple. Prayer took the place of sacrifice, and worship was rebuilt around the rabbis, who acted as teachers and leaders of individual communities. Remember, the destruction of the Second Temple was a profoundly traumatic experience for the Jews, who were now confronted with a difficult and far-reaching questions. How to achieve atonement without the temple? How to explain the disastrous outcome of the rebellion? How to live in the post-temple Romanized world? How people answered those questions depended largely on their position prior to the revolt. Revolutionaries like the Zealots had been crushed by the Romans and had little credibility. The last Zealots died at Masada in 73 AD. The Sadducees, whose teachings were so closely connected to the temple cult, disappeared. The Essenes also vanished, perhaps because their teachings so diverged from the issues of the times that the destruction of the Second Temple was of no consequence to them. Precisely for this reason, they were of little consequence to the vast majority of Jews. Basically, only two organized groups remained: the early Christians and Pharisees. Christianity became a global religion, and quickly Jews became a minor and insignificant part of this movement. And although first Christians believed in a physical return of the Messiah to Jerusalem and the establishment of the millennial kingdom where Jerusalem and the temple will be rebuilt, later generations started to view this belief as too Jewish and replaced it with an allegorical interpretation of the prophecies that allowed them to dismiss the establishment of the future kingdom and the temple in Jerusalem. The Pharisees became the most representative group of the Jewish people. Their vision of the Jewish law as means by which ordinary people could engage with the sacred in their daily lives provided them with a position from which to respond to challenges caused by the destruction of the temple in a meaningful way to the vast majority of Jews. Of course, this is a complex issue, and I'm simplifying it to give you an overview. Perhaps I should do a separate episode on the evolution of the Jewish religion. What do you think? Should I do it? Anyway, because the rabbinical Judaism provided a way for the Jewish religion to survive, the rebuilding of the temple for many Jews stopped being essential to their existence. However, not all Jewish people are satisfied with the current state of things. I would say even more, if you would ask the Jewish people if they would like the temple to be rebuilt, the vast majority of them would say yes. Out of the majority of Jews that would like to see the temple be rebuilt, there are certain groups that are very active in doing everything that is needed for it to be rebuilt. So, who are those people and what are they doing? So, the first group are the people connected to the Temple Institute. If you ever visit Jerusalem, you can visit their headquarters in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, where they have a museum dedicated to the Jewish temple. But the Temple Institute is not only about what the temple was, but also about what the temple will be. If you go to their website and read their statement of principles, you will clearly understand that they are devoted to rebuilding the temple. We read in the opening statement, "The Temple Institute is dedicated to all aspects of the divine commandment for Israel to build a house for God's presence, the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem." The range of institutes' involvement with this concept includes education, research, activism, and actual preparation. What is shocking in this passage is that they are not only preparing for the rebuilding of the temple, but also plan to build it on Mount Moriah. As you know, currently on this mountain we have the Dome of the Rock. If they believe that the Dome of the Rock is located over the most holy place, that is the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant stood, then the dome of the rock must be removed. And they actually respond to this reality in an interesting way. To the title, The Rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Our Time, they answer, the reality of the Jewish experience means that the temple will be rebuilt. Many people who visit the Temple Institute are incredulous and cannot help but to exclaim, do you really think that you will live to see the Holy Temple rebuilt? The answer to that question is of little importance. Let us rather recall that Jewish history has a trajectory which began when the patriarch Abraham smashed his father's idols. That trajectory has spanned the millennia, and it is obvious that we are rapidly approaching the climactic times in which the Holy Temple will once again become the focal point for mankind's spiritual focus. Whether this transpires in our generation or not, we can still choose to be active participants and not simply spectators in God's bold plan for the redemption of Israel and all humanity. So, in other words, Abraham smashed the idols, and today's Jews should also make way for the temple. And according to them, this climatic moment of history is approaching fast. On their webpage, we can also read that the temple is essential and cannot be replaced by rabbinical Judaism. We read, but we fool ourselves if we think that the state of Judaism today without the temple is normal. On the contrary, we are like fish out of water. If 1/3 of all the Torah commandments centers on the temple, it would seem that the biblical observance in the temple absence is but a skeleton of what God had intended it to be. So the Temple Institute not only believes it is essential to build the temple, but they are also very active in preparing for it. The Institute has begun to restore and construct the sacred vessels for the service of the Holy Temple. You can see those vessels when you visit the Institute. They are made according to the exact specifications of the Bible and have been constructed from the original source materials such as gold, copper, silver, and wood. They are authentic, accurate vessels, not merely replicas of models. All those items are fit and ready for use in the service of the Holy Temple. Among the many items featured in the exhibitions are musical instruments played by the Levitical chor, the golden crown of the high priest, and the gold and silver vessels used in the incense and sacrificial services. After many years of effort and toil, the Institute has completed the 3 most important and central vessels of the divine service: the 7-branch candelabra or menorah made of pure gold, the golden incense altar, and the golden table of showbread. Other completed projects include the sacred uniform of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest breastplate, ephod, and the tzitzis have been completed. All those and more can be seen at the Temple Institute Museum. So, all the instruments that are needed for the temple to function normally are already prepared and are waiting. The Institute is also preparing building plans and materials for the rebuilding of the temple. A group called the Temple Mount Faithful, led by Gershon Salomon, has actually prepared the cornerstones for the new temple using diamond rather than steel cutting tools, so as to confirm with the Bible injunction that no metal tool be used in the construction of the temple. The 6-ton stones have been consecrated with the water drawn from the biblical pool of Siloam. For the last several years, Solomon and his followers have attempted to place those cornerstones on the Temple Mount, but each time they have been stopped by the Israeli police. But when the time is right, it will not take long to actually build the third temple. millions of dollars have been already gathered for this fascinating project. But for the temple to function, you not only need the sacred vessels, you also need priests. There is also another group of people who are devoted to training future priests in the temple. And so, a training program was created and called the Nesher HaKodesh Institute for Kohanic Studies, and it will include classes on religious practice and also the role of modern technology in the Third Temple. The program will be opened to Kohanim, Jews believed to be descended from the biblical Aaron, the brother of Moses. The program started with 14 students in the pilot program, but now it is expanding to accommodate several dozen. Remember, in the time of the Second Temple, there were thousands of priests who fulfilled religious duties in the temple. Today, people are being trained to perform all the duties required in the temple by the priests, including performing animal sacrifices. In 2015, the Kohanim in the training completed an accurate, authentic reenactment of the Korban Pesach Passover offering. It is the first time in 2000 years that this offering has been witnessed. In the Samaritan hills near Silo, a lamb was inspected and its blood was passed from one Kohanim to another in a silver vessel called Mitzrak. So we have the sacred vessels, the garments, the building blueprints, people being trained for priests and actual sacrifices made. But there is still something that needs to happen before the temple can be built. The one key element missing at this moment is the finding of the ritually pure red heifer, which is necessary to fulfill the commandment to use a red heifer as a means of purifying the altar. We read about that in Numbers 19. Such specimens must be without blemish, and not even two of their hairs may vary in color. Previous red heifers have been disqualified many times, and the search is still going on for the perfect cow that would fit this description. However, rather than wait for the one to appear randomly in a flock somewhere on earth, the Temple Institute has begun a special red heifer breeding program that includes the implanting of frozen red Agnus embryons into domestic Israeli cattle. A co-founding campaign is underway to help found it. Each month, reports of red heifer candidate emerges. Some believe that when the perfect candidate will be found, the building of the temple will begin.
Whoever's by the edge, they're a bit antsy. Be careful.
Josh, you taking video? Because I'm taking stills.
You can see them peeking out. They look beautiful. Perfect. They just look perfect. They look happy, content. Wow, these look like the finest red heifers from around the world. For those not familiar with the song, it's all about the Holy Temple. The red heifers are going to make their way directly from here to 10 days, I believe, in quarantine. That's how you move livestock from country to country. Okay, they're getting a little anxious inside. Wow, this is really amazing. They're frightened by all the activity going on around them. Going onto that vehicle right there, and the workers here are trying to clear everybody away so they can make it right to the vehicle. I think anybody watching on our Facebook feed is probably getting the best shot of anybody in the world, the best view of these heifers right now. They are beautiful.
So what do you think about all of this? Do you think we are getting close to the building of the third temple? Let me know, what are your thoughts on this matter? By the way, according to the biblical prophecies, the third temple is not the millennial temple, but that's a topic for another episode. If you like this material, please give a like to this video. Also, you can support the channel by clicking join on the main channel page or by becoming a patron. Your support will help me to create more videos for you. Have a great day and shalom.